Okay, so welcome back. And what we'll do is I'll put up the presentation. Keep on building on the same presentation. And I'll just keep adding on each time another letter. And also, it's been a long time, so I'll do some backtracking. So we remember what we spoke about.
You mean you're going to give us a test?
Does this count for CPD?
The reason I'm not going to give you a test because then you'll stop coming.
You're scared I'll beat you.
True.
So I'll settle. I trust you. I think you remember everything. And let me do. Okay, so let me make myself. Okay.
Can you make it bigger, Yehuda? Because my nose is already on it.
Can't we make it bigger?
No, only Yehuda can.
Make it bigger. You can make, yeah.
Control plus, and we can make it bigger. Push Control plus. My daughter told me to do that in class at the same time.
Okay. Okay, so can you all see what we're seeing? Okay, so last time, and in the recap, I'm going to also add a few additions. So the most important thing is that we believe, according to most of the rabbis, that Hebrew is not just another language. Hebrew is the language that the world was created with, and therefore its letters not only provide insight into the world, but they can actually create things. Now, there's something called, I'm not putting in the presentation because it's really not recommended, there's something called Kabbalah Ma'asit, practical Kabbalah, where people actually take some of these secrets and create things and do things, but we really shouldn't do. Normal people should not do that. Most people should not do that because we don't really know what we're doing. But let's just say that that looking at the letters can provide us with insights, as we saw a little bit of the Aleph last week. Now, I want to add something that we didn't discuss last week. There's a book called the Sephirah Kusari. This book was written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, a rabbi, was one of the Rishonim, a rabbi from about 800 years ago. He wrote the famous famous poem at the time, Tzion Haloti Shali Lishlom Asiraich. Sometimes we sing a song. It's much longer, the original song. It's actually part of the Kinot that we read on Tisha B'Av. And he also wrote a book, a very interesting book, that tells about the Kuzar Kingdom. And the Kuzar Kingdom was a kingdom of idol worshippers. And their king, who was also like their priest, kept on having a reoccurring dream. And the dream says, your intentions are very good, but your actions aren't so good. And he decided that this is a sign that he's got to start looking for another religion. So idol worship is not for him. And at the time, he looked at the big religions, and he saw that there was Islam, he saw that there was Christianity, and he saw that there was philosophy, the ancient philosophers, Aristotle and those philosophers. It was almost like a religion. He didn't even consider coming to the Jews because the Jews were so downtrodden, it's impossible that the Jewish religion could be a real religion. Okay, apropos what you see where we are today and where they were then, you see the difference. And the book tells how he goes to the Christians and they're telling the story, and he says this just doesn't make sense. God coming down as a man, and it's just not logical. And he goes to the Muslims, and he doesn't connect to it either. And he goes to the philosophers, and the philosopher says, God is so great that he can't be involved in this world. And the king says, if he can't be involved in my world, then that's not the point. I'm having this dream that I've got to do something. I need a God that's reactive. And he said, well, seeing that the other two religions, the Christianity and the Islam, both mentioned the Jewish religion as their source, maybe he doesn't have a choice. He'll go talk to the Jews. And then he goes, and the whole book is different dialogues. And then he goes, talks to the Jew. And then the rest of the book, which is 95% of the book, is the dialogue between the king of the Kuzars and the rabbi. It's called the Chaver, the friend. And he asks all sorts of questions, and these questions give a lot of background about Judaism. It's quite a fascinating book. You can get translations in English also. Now, the one thing I want to emphasize, what the first thing that the rabbi says to him, he goes to these religions and he says, tell me about the world, tell me about truth, tell me about reality. And all of Brian, I think you in fact read that book once, maybe I suggested to you, maybe not, maybe I'm confused with another book. And each of these religions start talking about how the world was created, except the philosophers who said the world was never created, the world's always been. And when it came to the Jew didn't say that he believes in the God that created the world. The Jew said he believes in the God that took the Jewish people out of Mount Sinai and gave us the Torah. Took us out of Egypt and gave us the Torah. And the king said, you know what? I was right about not coming to the Jews. The other religions spoke about the creation of the world. And you just mentioned some event in history. Could have mentioned any other event. What's so special about that event? And then his answer is the reason why I've given him this whole background. The king of the Kuzar says that the difference between us and other religions is that the other religions, you have one person saying, I had a revelation, whether it was Jesus or whether it was Muhammad, and you either believe him or you don't believe him. But the uniqueness of the Jewish religion is that about 2 or 3 million people all had the revelation, right? We know that there were 600,000 men between the age of 20 and 60. If you add the woman, you get 1.2 million on average. You add the kids that were less than 20, the people that were older than 60, you get in the order of 2 or 3 million. And all of these people at least heard the first 2 commandments at Mount Sinai. They all saw the miracles, and you don't have to believe that, is Moshe genuine or is Moshe not genuine? And then afterwards, these 600,000 families passed this message down in 600,000 parallel paths until many years later, when it was written down in the Mishnah and later in the Gemara, and we saw that things matched up. Surely there are some machlokot and there are differences, but the basic belief, the basic things, everything matches up. And the emphasis that the king of the Kuzar comes to tell us is that this is called Kabbalah. Kabbalah is not, although it's usually translated today as Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah comes from the Hebrew word lekabel. What does lekabel mean, Heather? Receive, right. Kabbalah is what we received, the tradition that we received from our father, received from his father, from his father, who received from their great-great-grandfather at Mount Sinai. And I intentionally didn't say from Moses, I said from their great-great-grandfather. In other words, for this to be fake, it has to come in, there have to be many, a whole nation that collaborated to fake this. Very, very unlikely. And the reason why I'm saying this is because although we're looking at these letters and we think, well, maybe you could make this up and maybe you could make something else up, everything that these theories of these letters that Rav Kook is telling us in the other books, they're not made up. They come in the Kabbalah. They come from different sources, from different Masorot, and we're not just making up our own belief, because that's exactly what we said. Hebrew is the original language, and it's not the agreed language. So that's I think an important point as a background as we move on. And then we spoke about the letter Aleph, and we said Aleph recommends Elokim, Hashem, and we said that the name in the letter Aleph, right, you got the little yud on the top and the little yud on the bottom. The yud on the top is the eternity that we have no grasp of, above the barrier of the above, and the little yud on the bottom appears to be upside down, but it's actually Hashem's revelation in this world, everything. We said the Aleph is 1,000 and it's 1 because the myriad of things actually comes from one source. I just mentioned 2 gematrias. Gematrias, as we said last time, are numerical values, and it just adds to what we've already learned. So we said that the letter Aleph is drawn as with a vav in the middle and 2 yuds. And if you look at the value of yud, which is 10, and a vav, which is 6, and a yud, which is 10, we get 26, which is exactly the name of the value of God's name. God's name is yud and a hey, and a vav and a hey. And here's the arithmetic, which is the 26, which exactly matches what we learned that Aleph symbolizes Elohim, and that's why it's the first letter of the alphabet. Okay, so now that you've been waiting for all these weeks to hear about the bet, let's move on to the bet, unless there are questions. Okay, so Brian actually preempted this. I think I went the wrong direction. Preempted the bet with a question last week, saying, why wasn't the world created with a bet? And I gave a short answer. Why was the Torah created with the bet and not with the Aleph? And now we're going to do the same thing we did last week. We'll look at the 5 different qualities that we looked at for Aleph and we looked at for bet. And after we've done that, we'll review Brian's question again, and I think the answer will be in our face. Okay, so bet, the word bet is a house, right? A bayit, bet yudresh, bet yutaf is a house. We talk about the house of something. We say beit hakneset is the house of davening, right? Of gathering. Beit HaSefer is the school because it's the house of the book, and so forth. So the bet is a house. What is a house?
Bet Cholim.
Sorry?
Bet Cholim.
Beit Cholim, right? The house of the sick people. I don't know why they don't call it Beit Havra'ah, the house that will make you better, because it sounds like you want to go there to get sick. Yeah, they do call it Beit Havra'ah. Yeah, that's something else. But anyway, that's a Beit Cholim. So what is a house? A house, we live in a house in a home. Our house, our home, isn't us. The important thing is our people, our personalities, the neshama of who we are. But if you're homeless, if you haven't got a house to express who you are, to develop your qualities who you are, then you cannot do it. Very few people who are homeless can be successful people, can be influential people, can be people that you look up to. So even the house is something physical, and it's just a mortar or maybe even wood or made of something inanimate. The fact that it houses, that it's the home of the neshama, gives it the value of the house. Moving on to the numerical value. The numerical value of bet is, of course, 2. And in fact, I'll say now, if you have a neshama and you have the house, you have 2 different entities. And these 2 entities are very, very different entities, right? The one is the soul, the one is the essence, and the other one is secondary to it. The other one is just a servicing the first one. So we have the number 2. Always in numerology, you know, when we talk about numbers, 1 is something special. 1 almost always refers to God. 2 refers to multiplicity, because 2 is the first number that's not 1. And 2, the 2 are usually opposites. They're usually extreme opposites. Okay. Now the number, the sound bet, this does what Rav Kook doesn't actually say, but I was actually thinking about it, and I haven't seen this written in a book, and I'm emphasizing what I don't see written in books. But if you think about it, bet is actually a word on its own, right? If you want to say he is inside the room, in Hebrew you'd say hu b'cheder. In other words, the single letter bet replaces the whole word inside. So the sound b is inside. Okay, which again seems to match what we spoke about. If bet is a house, it houses the neshama, it provides the framework for the neshama to express itself, then everything else will be b inside it. The shape of the bet, let's look up at the big bet on the top, it'll be easiest to see, is closed on 3 sides and open looking forward. Now we know if we were writing the AlephBet, the Aleph would be on the right-hand side over here. So it's closed with a thin wall where the Aleph is, and it's got 2 thick walls above and below, and it's completely open looking forward to Gimel, Bet, Dalet, all the other letters. What Rav Kook and the other rabbis explain is that bet has to get everything that it has from the Aleph. So that's why the wall is only a thin wall. But there is still a wall there. Because the Aleph, the Elokim, the godliness is so strong that if there was no wall, the bet wouldn't be able to stand. It's almost like the sun, right? If you try to look at the sun, you directly you get blinded. But if you have strong enough filters, strong enough lens, sunglasses, very, very strong sunglasses, you can actually look at the sun. So by reducing the strength of the rays, you actually can look a little bit at the sun. I know this is something that we've done a few times when there's an eclipse of the sun, right? Anyone who tries to do that, to look at it directly is risking their eyesight. But one of the things you can do is get these very, very thick lenses, and then you can look, and then you can see the eclipse of the sun. Another parable I once heard, which I think tells us a lot, I heard from one of the rabbis here in Beit El, Rav Shabtai Sabato, many years ago. And he referred to the old-fashioned cameras that we had film. And the effect of the light on the film is what makes the picture, right? We know this in the darkroom here, and you develop the film. So in an initial thought, you may think that the more light I have, the better the picture. But we all know that's not true. In fact, you have to limit the light. We have to use a shutter, because if you have too much light, you burn the film. Okay, and the shutter in Hebrew is an ancient word. It's called a tzamtzam. Letzamtzam means to reduce. Okay, and in fact, in the Kabbalah, when they talk about tzimtzum, they talk about Hashem reducing His power to create the world. So this little wall over here in the bet, it takes the light from the Aleph, and it's the lens. It's not so thick that it completely blocks it out, but it's not so open that the light will be too strong and will get burnt. And that's why the right-hand side of this bet is so thin. On the other hand, on the top and on the bottom, we have very, very thick lights. Because there is a world above us and there are worlds below us. But the place that we can operate is inside the bet. From this point of view, the world is like a big house to us, it's like a big bet. And we can learn things, we can learn deep things, but we've got to realize that there's a limit. We can never understand Hashem properly. And if we try to go too high, or even try to go too low to forces, negative forces, it'll be damaging. So the lines on the top and the bottom are thick to symbolize that they're completely isolated or insulated. So the bet takes the light from the right-hand side, and what does he do? He uses this filtered light and the infrastructure that he provides, and uses it to influence all the other letters that come afterwards. So the Aleph and the Bet together are this combination team that provide the light for all the other letters, each in the time that we'll see one at a time. And it's very interesting, when you write the word Aleph and Bet together, what do you get? Av, you get a father, right? You get the parent figure, and that's exactly what the parent figure is. The parent figure is very often the parents will have a lot to teach the children, but they've got a limit to how they tell the children. They've got to tell them the same way. I remember one of my neighbors years ago. He had his first child, and he wanted to play the child tapes of Gomorrah. And that is the worst thing you can do to a little baby. You know, you've got to adapt the ideas to the child. And the same is true for the physical influence you have on your child. If you imagine, I don't know, if Muhammad Ali did, I think he had a child, right? Imagine when he came back from boxing and he picked up his little 1-month-old daughter. He didn't use all his force, right? He knew how to reduce his force in such a way that he could be gentle and provide what the daughter needs at her level. And that's the Av, that's the Aleph and the Bet together. And finally, the last quality that we looked at the first time the Bet, the letter appears in the Torah. And as Brian mentioned last week, very, very first letter in the Torah, Bereshit. And why is that? Why is it the first letter? And here he has completing the answer to you, Brian, because that's what the Torah is. The Torah is not something that stays upstairs. The Torah is the means to bring God's light, God's influence into this world. So the Torah is already the house. The Torah is the Aleph after it's been limited. And that's why the Torah starts with a bet. And in fact, it starts with two bets, Bereshit bara. And then immediately afterwards, we have two Alephs, right? So it tells us that the bet, the duality of the bet, and the fact that it appears twice, indicates to us that in this world, we have, because of this reduction, we have physicality and we have spirituality. We have some remnant of the Aleph, and we have the bet. They're both in this world. But the emphasis here is on the bet. The bet will come first. As we said, otherwise everything will be burnt. So to sum up everything we settle now, without going through all the qualities again, the bet is the means, is the house, is the, it's almost like a candle, right? What benefit do you get from a candle? The benefit from the candle is the light or the heat. But we need a wax or oil. We need a wick. We need a container, glass, something to hold it when it starts melting, right? All of these are the bet. And without that, you don't get the light. Okay. And that's the bet. And that's what we have for today. Unless there are any questions.
Yeah, I just had a confusion of when you said the house, and you talk about the spirit, why is the body not a house? I mean, why can't you refer to the body as a house?
Right. The body is a house. Okay. In fact, what I'm going to do, I like your question. I'm going to take it to talk about another concept, which I call fractal. The fractal is a modern word. Maybe I'll add in a few pictures next week if I remember. But I use the word fractal to describe the way Hashem built the world. A fractal is a picture within a picture. Now imagine if I took a picture now of myself, and here, imagine I had the zoom on this camera, and then I put it over here, and then you'd see us in the picture, and then inside the picture you'd see this camera even smaller, and you see inside another picture of the camera, and it goes on forever, right? Or like when you go into those lifts or elevators, and you have two mirrors, you see yourself going on and on and on forever. When you have a picture within a picture, the artists call it fractals. And you have a lot of examples. Brian, maybe you've come across it in architecture sometimes, or art. Like you remember, I don't know if you remember, Moraine Shishul had those on the outside wall, had those Magen David, those bricks that made the shapes of Magen David. But if you look carefully, the small Magen David actually is part of a bigger Magen David. It's part of a bigger Magen David. It also appears in nature, the fractals. Now, if you take certain trees and you look at a branch, and you look at a twig on the branch, very often you'll find that it follows the exact same pattern. And another thing they found, which is amazing, that if you take a coastline, like on a map, and you zoom in many thousands times, and you compare the zoom picture to the larger picture, very, very often you get an almost identical picture. So you see this like picture in a picture that appears a lot. Now, what's this got to do with everything we're talking about? One of the basic beliefs of the Kabbalah, okay, and I'm using the Kabbalah in both senses of the word, as we said earlier, right? Something that we receive, but that means it's also very deep, is that because everything comes from Hashem, Hashem built his DNA, if you like, inside everything. Which means that he built the world on a certain model, and he took this model and he built man, which is like the small picture in the world, on exactly the same model. And he built an apple on exactly the same model. And he built everything in the world on the same model. Now, to keep it simple, let's just look at man and the world. So when we say that man is a small world, or we can turn it around and say the world is a big man, What we're actually saying is, if you actually understand the human psychology, you can understand how Hashem runs the world. Or if you learn how Hashem runs the world, you can get an understanding of human psychology. Okay, and you may have heard of the Sephirot, the 10 Sephirot that Hashem manages the world. Just like he manages the world, there have been books to show how the psychology of a person follows the same 10 Sephirot. Rav Ginsburg, who was involved in South Africa a lot, has written several books on that, and other people. So when we talk about what we spoke about now, that there's a neshama, a godliness, and we spoke about the house, this appears on all levels. At the next level, maybe the house, together with the godliness inside, will be viewed as a low level, as an Aleph. We spoke a little bit about Av, right?
Mhm.
So two parents become the parents of the child. Later on, these children get married. These children then become parents. Okay, so if you like, the grandparents are the big light, and the parents become a smaller light, and the children become a smaller light, and so it goes on generation to generation. In the same way, you have a house and a secondary house and a third house. So you're right, Svea, if you're looking in terms of, if you consider us as a neshama, then our house is the bayit. If you look at just as our soul, if you're looking at on a more personal scale, then our body is the house.
Mm.
Okay, so in other words, the bayit is not necessarily a bayit physical house, but it's the vessel, the physical embodiment or infrastructure that anything spiritual needs in this world.
Okay. That
Yehuda,
makes sense to me.
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
Number one, you mentioned that every letter has got the characteristics of the Aleph. So I've seen the two vets, the vets. Where's the Aleph? Where's the Alephs in the word vet?
Okay. Now, what I said all the letters are made up of the Yud and Vav.
Sorry, where's the Yuds? Where's the Yuds?
Okay. No, they don't have to be made up of Yud. They can be made up of Yuds and or Alephs and or Vavs. So in the bit,
So it's not necessarily all. You won't necessarily find the Yud and the Vav in every letter.
Right.
Okay.
And let me give you, if you want, I'll give a reason why the bet doesn't have any Yuds.
Yeah.
Okay. The Aleph, we said it's taking, let me put the presentation on again just to see the two letters. It's just easier to talk when the letters are in front of us. So we said the Aleph, you have the Yud, which is godliness, right? And we said the Vav is like a long Yud, which is pulling the godliness from one place to a lower place. And then it connects it to the Yud, which is the revelation of God in this world. So that's why we need a Yud and an Aleph connecting them.
To separate.
Because the bet, its whole essence is just a house. To house it, it is a Vav, right? In this case, two Vavs, right? A round Vav and a straight Vav. It doesn't have the Yud, it accepts the Yud. Its Yuds are in the Aleph.
Okay. Well, so that's question one. Question two, you mentioned that there's what's the word? It's got a plurality.
Right.
The top and the bottom. Could that be the what I'd call the yin and the yang, or the positive and the negative?
Yes, the plurality is not necessarily the top and the bottom. The plurality is the neshama and the and the guf, the body and the spirit. But the plurality is any of the two extremes in this world. You know that the scientific philosophers say that this whole world is split in opposites. You have the plus and minus of a charge. You have the the magnetic
Like
north
it's
and
the-
south
yeah.
pole. And even in what's his name's guy who wrote Da Vinci Code. In one of his books, he talks about matter and antimatter, right? Everything has to have its counterpart in this world, and that is the bet. Okay, the main bet, right? The ultimate plurality is the soul and the body, okay, or God and this world, right? But within it, we're talking about fractals again, and we're talking about how it appears in smaller beings. It's every time you have these two opposites. And every time you have these two opposites, you should look, one of the sides will be more of an influencer, and the other side will be more of a recipient. It appears in man and woman. Man and woman are the duality, right? And we always got to try to bring them together. That's the way we create new men, are by bringing the man and woman, two opposites together into one whole. So these are the bet is these two opposites. Okay, and if you want to, in terms of philosophy, we can call it thesis and antithesis. Okay, you have a thesis, you have an idea, and antithesis is something that will come say, punkt verkehrt, dafke the opposite. Okay, and there'll be some truth in that also.
If you just something to talk about, you take any other language or any other alphabet, could they not come up with a you come up, let's call it a theory, for lack of a better word. Let's come up with you come up with a theory on the way the letters are formed. Could they not come up with a similar theory on the English alphabet?
Yeah, so it hasn't happened, as far as I know, it hasn't happened in any other alphabet to date. And this is not new, right? A lot of this was hidden, but but what I'm saying, a lot is written in books that opinions differ, whether they're 700 years old or 3,500 or 2,000 years old. In fact, some of it appears in a book that will say was written by Avraham Avinu, and that goes back years, almost 4,000 years. So, you know, could somebody do it? Yes, I'm sure somebody could make up stories. But let's just look at, again, the qualities that we look at, and you see that they don't exist. Most of them don't exist in other languages, right? The names we mentioned last week, they don't exist. They don't have, you have names, but they don't have meanings. A, B, C doesn't mean anything, okay? Where Aleph, Bet, and Gimel all mean something. We'll see later on that there are one or two letters that don't have a meaning, and even that has a meaning, okay? The numerical value that we base on a lot, right? We spoke about it last time, each letter having a different value. We don't find this in other letters. Sometimes they'll take the ABC to A to Z and write 1 to 26.
Yeah.
But you don't find anything like this in any other language. So so it's, you know, theoretically it's possible, but then you'd expect that in the last 5,500 years it would have happened. And as far as I know, as far as I've read, it hasn't happened yet.
Never happened. תודה רבה.
תודה לכם.